Welcome back, boys. Today we have one. What's really causing the global population to bust? Let's check it out.
Birth rates are declining everywhere. Among right-wing circles, there has long been a discussion of how the West is not reproducing itself and is quickly being replaced, but taking a look at populations in East Asia, India, the Middle East, Latin America, and even in Africa, and this trend of falling birth rates is universal. The key difference with the West is that this decline is occurring alongside waves of mass immigration, contributing to an increased awareness in Western countries of their own population's shrinkage. Now, the cause for this decline is baffling to many, with theories ranging from environmental pollutants to antenatal social norms and even economic circumstances like inability to afford a home or get a good job to support a family on a single income. Hand in hand with these theories are all manner of proposed solutions to what some have called the demographic crisis. There is a fear that this crisis could ultimately spell the extinction of humanity, but apparently more concerning to many than the possible end of the human race are the short-term impacts. How can you sustain services like Social Security if the youth population keeps shrinking? How are we going to maintain a competitive economy if our labor force keeps getting smaller? How do we project military strength if our armies are a fraction of what they used to be? It may shock you to hear this, but we don't really need to worry about any of that, and I'm going to explain why in great detail to hopefully alleviate your fears and point out what does need to be focused on if we want to avoid any of those worst-case scenarios. This is a topic I've covered before and something I paid close attention to because, like many are now panicking over, I thought this was a much more serious situation than it actually was. Yes, there's some major problems we need to solve, and unfortunately no one in major positions of power is advocating for solving all of them at once. But there's some optimistic signs that we're gradually moving in the right direction. Hello audience, Mr. Z here with another video for you. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We have videos like this every week on history and politics, so remember to give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned. Now, if we're going to be discussing the declining global birth rates, this might be a good opportunity to offer you fellas a guide to rebuilding civilization should the worst befall us. Literally the ultimate guide to rebuilding a civilization, or as the good folks over at Hungry Minds like to call it, the book. This giant codex is some 400 pages of hand-drawn illustrations providing a general guide on how to reproduce some of mankind's greatest inventions and discoveries. From how to create fire, to how to preserve foods, to how a combustion engine works, and much, much, much more. This is easily one of the most unique books I've ever seen. If anyone's ever heard of it, this feels like turning the pages of the Voynich manuscript. But if it was put together by a cross between Leonardo da Vinci, Nikola Tesla, and this is going to discount when you follow my link in the description, just a sec. This is going to upset some people, but in very simple terms. The population or demographic crisis is the right-wing equivalent to the climate crisis. Yes, there is a real phenomenon we are observing, be it declining birth rates or changes to the climate. Yes, in an absolute worst-case scenario, both crises could lead to the extinction of humanity, but honestly, what worst-case scenario wouldn't? The average person crusading against either of these crises actually has no idea what's really causing it. Most of the proposed approaches to solving the crises are actually only slightly effective and make no real change, and finally there's nothing we can sensibly do to stop them. And I'll stress that word sensibly, because honestly if you really wanted to, you could increase your country's fertility rate just about as practically as you could net zero your country's carbon emission. Yeah, it's doable, but it's not practical, at least not for now. And just like this would only slightly mitigate climate change, you'd only slightly be above replacement level fertility rate. So what proposed solutions have people put forward to solve this issue? We'll start with the most faulty one, which is immigration appears to have been adopted by various Western governments, yes, as a means of humanitarian support to populations seeking better opportunity, but within certain circles there's a very
If too many come in too quick at the same time, they won't integrate properly, and they just create parallel societies.
evident recognition of population decline and the use of immigration as a perceived solution. It's clear enough to see in political arguments and slogans like, immigration is the source of our strength. Americans don't want to work those jobs. We need to recruit the top talent wherever they may be, and of course the infamous, American culture has venerated mediocrity over excellence for far too long. This perception frames the demographic decline as a numbers issue, one that can be solved by just adding more numbers now from other countries. It's a view that tends to see people of different cultures as easily interchangeable units of labor, or on the more optimistic side believes assimilation into, for example, American culture is total, universal, and consistent. Importation of more raw labor does not solve the root problem. The root problem is that people here are not having children. If
And even like it's like more of a culture problem also. It's like if these people that come into these countries, their children get rooted in the culture, and then they stop reproducing as well. So it's like it doesn't help just importing forever. You need to fix the culture problem. It's like being a mother is kind of looked down upon now.
anything, this exacerbates the problem as more adult laborers means less housing, fewer jobs, and more competition with native citizens, which contributes to economic circumstances which delay starting a family. The only people this helps are the aged and the economic elite, as you import not only more laborers for large corporations, but more laborers paying into Social Security and other government funds. This is the difference between legal and illegal immigration. Illegal immigration is good for big businesses seeking cheap labor. Legal immigration is okay for business because they still get more labor, but it's especially good for the government, who gets more taxpayers. But both types of immigration ultimately hurt the native citizen. It's not a good strategy. What strategies actually help raise the fertility rate? The idea of using baby bonuses or government subsidization to stimulate a new baby boom is well-meaning and ultimately a net positive for families, but insofar as its ability to raise the fertility rate, it may be futile.
Which country was it that dumped a lot of money into that? Was it Korea or Japan that tried that, and it didn't really help much?
Hungary is probably the poster child and inspiration for many looking to follow suit, as under Viktor Orban, the country implemented massive reforms to benefit families, including tax breaks, even eliminating the income tax for larger families, subsidizing home ownership for married couples, subsidizing medical care for children, a child care allowance which basically allows one parent to stay at home and still receive an income. The list goes on. But the real question is, how effective has this been? Well, Hungary went from a fertility rate low of 1.2 to a 3-decade high of 1.6 before falling back to 1.5. To Orban's credit, he stopped the bleeding for now, and these policies are absolutely beneficial to those populations starting families, but the country is still below replacement. Maybe we just need to try again, you might say. France had implemented similar policies in the early 1900s and then doubled down on those policies in 1994. The fertility rate rose from 1.66 to 1.68. Germany, 2007, rose from 1.33 to 1.4. South Korea, 2006, the fertility rate fell from 1.1 then to 0.7 today. Japan, 1994, fertility rate went from 1.5 then to 1.2 today. Australia, 2004, fell from 1.7 to 1.5. Russia 2007, 1.4 then and 1.4 now. Singapore 2001, 1.4 down to 1 today. And how about a familiar one? Here in the United States, the closest thing we've had up until recently was the child tax credit passed in 1997. The fertility rate fell from 1.97 then to 1.6 today. Should we just keep trying? I mean, we might as well. I appreciate what these credits, programs, and subsidies do. They're absolutely helping young families who are just starting off, and they may help offset rapid fertility rate fall-offs, but clearly they're not having the intended effect of restoring replacement-level birth rate. Hungary shows us that, yes, home ownership, steady income, stay-at-home opportunities, basically taking all the economic strain out of child raising and even offering economic incentive helps, but it doesn't motivate people to start having 2.5 children again. So what does? Carl Benjamin, or Sargon of Akkad, made a video some weeks ago essentially chalking up declining fertility rates to a matter of status. Not to take the wind out of his sails so quickly, but this suggestion that this declining birth rates is exclusively a Western issue misses the point that it isn't just a problem with how Western cultures view motherhood or with the lack of so-called family or child-friendly spaces. The decline is rooted in something a lot deeper, which is impacting everyone, not just Western society. Now, in the video, he goes on to reference a woman who proposed the problem was the West's celebration of promiscuity in contrast to its low-status view of motherhood. She brought up Mongolia as a prime example and model to follow, but
Yeah, we saw a video on Mongolia, and they have a rising population rate, or like fertility rate, but I'm pretty sure it was. And there they celebrate motherhood and see it as like the highest status you can have as a woman.
This seems to have been a bad anecdote. India is a country that celebrates motherhood. Russia is a country that celebrates motherhood. Iran is a country that celebrates motherhood. And yet, all of them, Mongolia included, are facing birth rate decline. Yes, there was a little spike recently, but it's since been declining, and it's following a very
Oh.
similar trend to other countries in the Central Asian steppe. The matter of social honors, which Carl brings up in the video, yeah, Russia has one of those, France has one of those. They're not really putting much of a dent in the numbers, though. The point about women being less active in community building, maybe there's a point to that. It's true that social clubs and a lot of these local societies that women were involved with in their free time have dried up, but it's not like they went away. They just kind of moved online and became more wide reaching. It's like with guys in fraternal organizations. Instead of meeting up with the fellas at the lodge or the bowling alley, now they're meeting up in their Steam or Discord group chat. Like, people don't factor that in when they talk a lot about how we have become more atomized. Look, no one's taken away from that. That is true insofar as our local communities are concerned. But a big reason for that is a lot of that community has moved online. Do you need a social club when you have your Discord group chat of like 20 some people or more who you're all friends with and you all game on the weekend? I mean, what is that if not the modern equivalent to meeting up with the guys and going bowling or playing pool? I went on a bit of a tangent there, but back to the topic at hand. Here in the United States, you have a sentiment among some young conservatives that the cool, based, and trad thing to do is to get married, buy a farm, and have 7 kids ASAP. It's already something that a lot of people consider cool, quote unquote. But then you look at these guys who've been saying this since Trump took office for the first time, that's roughly a decade now, and how many of them have lived up to it? And keep in mind, I don't say this to disparage that lifestyle. For those who pursue this and successfully seek it out, all power to you. That is a wonderful lifestyle to live. It is a healthy lifestyle to live. But who I criticize are the people who will say these things and never act upon them. The people for who this is just a matter of points. Of, yeah, look at me, I'm trad, I'm traditional, I'm going for this, and that, and then, those values fall apart when put into actual practice because they don't believe in them. They don't actually care about them. But it is an aesthetic thing. That's sort of the whole crux of this. It's not a matter that living this lifestyle is unpopular. It is quite popular in various circles. It's just people don't seem to have the will to actually go through with it. You can try to make it a cool cultural thing, and that's already sort of been what's going on. But you're living the results of that. You're living in that a decade later, and this is where we are. You have a large population of young people who have internalized this, or at least openly expressed that this is the cool thing to do, yet they don't do it. And maybe they will get married, and maybe they'll have 2 kids, but that's only when Trump finally gets his baby bonus policy through, and maybe once they get the right job and they save enough for a house. It's not really about that. It seems very clear to me that for much of Generation Z, at least here in the United States, many of the milestones earlier generations hit in their 20s won't be hit until they get into their 30s. Buying a house, getting married, having kids, and part of that's because of a prolonged adolescence, where a lot of Gen Z in their 20s don't feel like they're really adults yet. They still feel like they're figuring things out and don't really have any urgency to do anything because, relatively speaking, the world is kind of stable. It's easy to forget that these lives are ours to live at our own pace, and the anxiety many feel, at least young men I should say, about locking all of this down within a certain window of time, it does nothing but diminish the quality of our day-to-day. Have kids, and as many kids with the one you love because you love them, not because it's some task to check off before you turn 30. And again, I stress that more so for guys. Girls are on a bit more of a tight schedule when it comes to that because, of course, how fertility works. But for young guys, don't stress about it. Let's get back to the meat and potatoes of the demographic crisis. We can't really stop it. Populations look like they're going to keep declining for a while, but that doesn't mean it's going to keep going down until 0. That would be the almost impossibly unlikely worst case scenario. Just as with natural climate change, the solution isn't to try to keep things exactly as they are. The solution is to adapt. Recognize that we live in a changing world, in a changing universe, and it's on us to adapt to that change, not to desperately try to manipulate forces beyond our control. The first big thing you'll want to adapt to is going to be that labor shortage.
Reason why it is declining, it is so many different reasons. It's like, how many? Is it 10, 20, 30? All of them combined is this is the result. And a lot of dudes have difficulty finding a woman they can take serious here in the West. That's why a lot of dudes, they get their passport and they leave. They go to, I mean, there's many. You can go to Poland, you can go to Romania. A lot of dudes, they go to Philippines, they go to Thailand.
If your population is shrinking, you need to be able to maximize what each worker can do, and lucky for us, we're in the perfect spot for that. AI, automation, quantum computing, we're in and progressing through an age of innovation in which the amount of work a single laborer can do is growing exponentially. The modern factory sees heavy lifting primarily done by machines and coordinated by a handful of human workers. Some have even become what are known as dark factories, which operate 24/7 and without any lights because all or nearly all of the labor is conducted by machine. It's really short-sighted to say we must import foreign labor because we're going to run out of low-skilled labor. Even translating this over to high-skilled labor is kind of absurd, not only because you're shortchanging American workers, but because, again, tech innovation increases the capabilities of every worker. It's quite possible that within 2 decades, the average laborer will be able to perform about 10,000 to 100,000 times the labor, if not more, of a single worker in 1950, without much more effort. One skilled worker operating an entire factory of machines all on his own, that's no longer in the realm of science fiction. It's a reality that we're catching up with. And what of the technician, the bean counter, the software developer? Yes, technology is exponentially growing what they can do as well. You have AI programs that can write 1,000 lines of code in a minute. That's something that might have taken a coder hours or days to do. You have systems that can take a photograph and identify various parts of a contraption, maybe your car, and walk you through the process of how to repair something or build something. When it comes to our productiveness, our ability to work, and in turn, our ability to maintain a stable economy and quality of life, we're going to be fine as long as we keep on the developmental path we're already on and keep building it better. There's basically no reasonable argument for immigration.
What jobs are people gonna have? Like like AI is gonna replace a lot of jobs, and I don't hear what he's talking about. Like, where are the jobs for the people? What are people going to do? What are people's purpose now? A lot of people, they take a long education, and then at the end now AI replaces that, and it's like you just wasted so much time and money getting an education that now AI is doing your job better than you and faster than you. It's like,
Immigration at that point unless you actively want to change the demographic makeup of your country, and keep in mind, in a situation where populations start declining, there's nothing but negatives to be drawn from that. Remember that a shrinking population means more housing than ever is going to be available, which means housing prices are going to go down dramatically, unless, of course, you feel the need to bring more people into the country even though machines can do what they're doing. Machines don't need housing. Machines aren't going to drive your home prices up 200%, but immigration will. Then you also have the issue of clashing cultures and competition, and you can argue up and down about assimilation, but for a country like, say, the United States, assimilation has never really worked for us. I have a whole video about that here. But basically, the cultures that come over to America end up becoming small microcultures within the bigger, basically American empire. Even Vivek Ramaswamy seems to imply that foreigners have a superior culture to America, and that's why we need to import more of them, essentially saying that, yeah, he wants to change America's culture, and more immigration will do that. We don't need clashing cultures within our country, especially if we're going to be dealing with a big issue like population decline. Better to keep the stable culture or cultures that are here and not upset the balance by adding new groups who are going to compete for jobs, compete for housing, compete for status, and who realistically will be looking toward their own interests as a group. Even geopolitically, this is a bad idea because you're effectively brain draining every other country and dooming them to decline. It's really not beneficial to any party involved. The fear that the human population is just going to go extinct is, again, an extreme and unreasonable fear. Projections have the total population set to continue rising until 2070, just about, and by 2100, the global population is expected to fall back to where it is today. And by 2200, the global population will be where it was in 1987. That's not too scary of a thought. But then there's the question of, well, will our civilization survive this? Will countries with an especially low birth rate like South Korea or Japan or France or England survive culturally? And the answer is simple. Yes, so long as they cease all foreign immigration and they're not invaded. The problem with Japan, France, and England isn't that their domestic population is shrinking. That is something the world at large is facing or will be facing soon enough. And technological
Yeah, the urban areas of the world globally, big cities. They that's kind of where over socialization and decadence and degeneracy spring up, and this is where people stop having children. The future of mankind is gonna be the people who are rural, the people who do not live in cities right now. They are the ones who will inherit the world when the world's population halves in the next century.
advancements will allow for continued economic stability and productivity. However, if you import so many foreigners that the domestic culture becomes overshadowed by the imported culture, yeah, that's a problem. And they're inflicting that on themselves. Very unnecessarily, mind you. Japan has the 11th largest population in the world, France has the 20th, Britain the 21st. We're talking about several tens of millions, and in Japan's case, over 100 million people. You can survive as a civilization if your population gradually goes from 60 million to 40 million over the course of 2 centuries. That's nowhere near extinction risk, and 2 centuries is a lot of time to turn things around. But the question then becomes again, with immigration, are those 60 million all part of your culture and will they preserve it into the future? Or are 25% of them foreigners who, as of right now, have a higher birth rate than the native born population? Well, then by 2200, you probably won't have 40 million, you'll have maybe 10 million. The imported culture will have 10 million descendants, and maybe 20 million will be an amalgamation of the two. Still, 10 million isn't a bad number. You're basically as big a population as Israel is today, but again, it could be significantly more if you cut off immigration and you save yourself the risk of potential infighting along the way, which is always possible when you have competing groups in the same country. I really wouldn't worry too much about the birth rate situation. As I said, this is one of those things where we're just going to have to adapt to it, and as countries, the smart way to do that would be to go all in on automation and to heavily restrict or totally cut off all immigration. That way, yes, even if your country's population shrinks, that population is still 100% your country. But wait, why is the demographic crisis happening? Why are fertility rates and birth rates falling across the world? Yes, environmental pollutants are a likely contributor. Yes, cultural norms which prioritize careers over families are big contributors, especially in the developed world. Yes, economics do play a role, albeit not in the way most would think. The short answer is civilization. Civilization is both what has brought us this far and keeps pushing us forward, but it's also the root of our problem. If we look at the animal kingdom, we notice an interesting trend. Wild animals, when compared to the same animals in captivity, reproduce more often. When we look at humans, both in contemporary times and across history, populations of man under poorer or harsher conditions to their wealthier counterparts also follow this pattern. Humans under harsher conditions actually reproduce more than those under wealthier, stabler conditions. My persuasion is that there is a Goldilocks zone at play here. Man living purely in the wild like an animal, say under hunter-gatherer circumstances, would be under threat of predation, would be limited in terms of the nutrition he can receive, and would be under intense stresses, all of which might contribute to lower birth rates. That's certainly the conclusion some zoologists have come to as for why some wild animals decline. A handful would survive until adulthood, but now, most of them were crossing that line, and soon after this trend, that birth rate began to steadily decline. France was one of the earliest to suffer the effects of this in the late 1800s, and that's why they adopted hardcore pro-family and natalist policies as early as they had, with the spectrum is more and more stress and pressure. There is a Goldilocks zone, but it's becoming many heirs to divide one's inheritance between and diluting the family wealth. You can see what happens here.
Yeah, I would assume it would get more and more unsafe. And the thing is, when when this starts to get like really bad, it's like services and everything is gonna get worse because there's less people. Yeah, this is not exactly a good thing. Talking to people online is not the same as spending time with them in real life. Yeah, there's no community. People don't have friends. People are alienated, like they're alone. And nobody, the men are alone. They got no women. There's no brotherhood. There's no community. Do you need a social club when you have Discord? Yeah, this guy who made the video, it's like you can't have proper friendships over the internet, man. You need to struggle with people, like go on hikes and stuff and create bonds. You can game with people 10 hours a day, but they'll never be like your friends like that. For most people, that is. The cause is technology and the changes it brings. Really don't understand why people are shocked by low fertility in a world of anti-conception, which makes reproduction and conscious choice as supported to reaction to natural impulse. Yeah, the introduction of like the what's it called, the pill, you know, women can take that to not get pregnant. Education, of course, shortens fertility window. Urbanization, high population density, which lowers fertility in animals. Yeah, over socialization. It's like you don't feel kind of safe or at peace, you know? If you lived in a village with 200 people and you know everybody, it's like it would be chill. But if you see like strangers every day and you feel more like if society gets more and more unsafe and unstable, it's doesn't exactly help. Expensive housing as well as unpopularity of multi-generational housing. Yeah, now it's like you kind of get thrown out as soon as possible, and families don't stick together as well as much. Here in, I mean, in Poland, in Romania, it's like you can meet a single, let's say, 26-year-old woman, 27-year-old woman, and she still lives with her parents or is very very close to her parents, and maybe even has a curfew. Could you imagine that, meeting like a 26, 27-year-old woman that has a curfew and she doesn't go out and, you know, run the streets? Yeah, materialism. Yeah, anyway, boys, what do you guys think? I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I see you boys on the next one. Take care of yourself.